Ever since his skills were revealed, I've been thinking a lot about Brave Claude, and why I think he might actually be the best unit to use in Light Season Aether raids. There are two main reasons for this. First of all, let's look at his comparison to another popular but older Light Season tank, the Lion King, whose name we shall not say to avoid flirting with YouTube danger. Kayn is an armored beast unit with 174 or 175 BST, compared to Claude's flying bow typing with 166 to 167 BST. Mufasa here is a godlike force in Aether raids, as you can see in some of my daily AR videos, but he's held back by the positioning restrictions of being a beast unit, as well as the movement woes of being an armory unit. As a flyer with 2 range, CYL Claude has arguably the best movement, range, and positioning ability available in Fire Emblem Heroes, and trades only 7 total stat points for it. When you consider that Kayn's perf gives +4 to all stats on enemy phase, while Claude's gives +5, that gap shrinks to 3, and Claude's weapon works in both phases. It wasn't totally clear to me just how bonkers Claude is until I actually looked up this comparison, which is why I thought it was worth sharing. And while raw BST is by no means the most important thing in Aether raids, it really does say something that a 2-range flyer has this kind of pure numbers behind him. Despite his extravagant move and weapon typing, he's got the stats to carry you wherever you need to go. The other reason Brave Claude impresses me so much is his versatility. I think it's generally held that there are 4 key strategies to use on Aether Raid's offense: tanking, Vantage, Hit and Run, and Gale Force. Now, Claude doesn't have Njorn's Zeal, so Gale Force is off the table, but he's completely capable of running the other 3, and the thing that makes him so strong is that he can actually use all 3 at the same time, if you choose to. Here are some examples of mixed strategies in action. Not many characters in this game can pivot strategies on a turn-to-turn basis like this, and it is extremely potent. One of the only others that comes to mind is a Vantage set on Legendary Leaf, which I know Indulger has shown to be pretty ridiculous in his Aether Raids videos. But even that is a relatively niche strategy that is not applicable to every map, and I think Claude's coverage is far wider. So with that background, let's talk about how you use Mr. Golden Deer Leaderman in Aether Raids. When I first saw Wind Parthia's effects, my initial thought was to support him with Male Corrin or Brave Lucina, in order to stack King Deer's stats to the stratosphere. But my initial tests made these strategies feel really cumbersome to use. It can be pretty difficult to set them up, especially in a reasonable number of turns. These strategies tend to be almost totally enemy phase centric, which sacrifices some of Claude's mixed phase potential, which in my mind is what makes him both so strong and so fun to play with. In my mind, the best way to support him is with units who can boost him up without being nearby, which is why I've settled on triple Mythics being the optimal team comp for Almyra's King. All the builds I'm going to show will be based on running 1 Air, 1 Peony, and 1 Milla, but I think almost any Mythic combination will be effective if you plan around it and learn how to use it. I do strongly recommend having at least 1 Peony on the team, though, and probably not more than 1 Milla. If you don't have 3 Mythics on hand, Claude is still totally usable, and I do think that Brave Lucina, Male Corrin, and even a Versa make solid supports for him, but you might need to get a little bit more creative with your gameplay. Using Mythics for support lets you boost the Deer Lord's visible stats and HP, which help him with tanking and buff his heals, plus each of them can provide fantastic support in other ways too. This is also why I'm specifically recommending him in Light Season. While he can certainly still be a force in Astra Season, I'd say other units like Brunia are better suited to the particular demands of Astra and Anima. Light Mythic builds to support Brave Claude are quite flexible. Here are some budget builds as examples. I'd suggest keeping all of their exclusive skills, though Air's Sparkling Boost and Lithyaberg are debatable. Inheriting Ward or Goad flyers onto Peony gets my skill of approval. One of the only things he actually loses to are skills like Lunge and Dragback, which take him more than 2 spaces away from an ally and shut off Wind Parthia, so it's imperative to snipe anyone like that before they get to him. Peony makes this much easier to pull off, which is why I had them get married. So how do we build Claude himself? Well, Iote's shield is non-negotiable for this guy, and I feel really strongly that Pulse Smoke is his optimal C slot. With how nuts his healing potential is, the biggest thing you really have to avoid is outright one-shots and pre-charged specials. Pulse Smoke is the best defense against that. I'd say that his native attack speed Rain is probably the next best option, since it will always be active in combat, or Attack Smoke if you really want something else. But I prefer using Milla's Sabotage Attack to accomplish that debuffing goal. Any 2 cooldown special is viable. I've gone with Glimmer in these examples, but Moonbow and Ruptured Sky are just as usable. The selection doesn't matter quite as much as it does with some other units, because in a lot of cases the damage added by the special is less important than the fact that Claude will heal when it goes off. But if you notice that you're barely missing some key one-shots with one special, you might want to try switching to another. And of course, Reposition is going to be a great assist skill for him. Claude's playstyle will be defined by his A-slot skill. The general archetypes I've seen discussed are as follows: Distant Defense 4, Solo Skills, Tier 4 Stances, Close Counter or Foil, and the budget Fury 4. I don't think that Distant Defense 4 is very good, since it's super specialized, and the dull ranged effect loses a lot of value against many well-built defense teams. And while solos do improve his dual phase potential, I think their benefits are dwarfed by the advantages of the other sets, so let's take a look at those. I'll give it to you straight. I think that the Tier 4 Stance build is probably the best one overall, and it gives Claude the best odds in the most situations. Mirror Stance 3 is my choice out of the ones currently in the game, but it's tough to go wrong since they have different situational strengths and the guard effect is just as important as any of the stats. The idea with these is to use King Deer's superior movement, range, and offenses to snipe 1 or 2 scary threats on player phase with Peony's help, and then comfortably sweep, or outright tank, the rest of the team on enemy phase. While he can't counter at one range, this can actually be advantageous in a lot of scenarios. If there's a melee dancer, they'll most likely barely scratch him, and leave you plenty of time to leisurely collect the ether pots. With the snipes and pulse smoke, infantry pulse teams should get shut down pretty hard, and the guard effect of the stance will stop them from charging up again. Quick Riposte all but guarantees that there will be no survivors who approach him at 2 range. It may seem like overkill given how fast he is in the first place, but this shuts down any impact skills as well as first hit damage reduction on units like Kagero or Spring Mia. These are things that routinely show up to ruin my good time in Aether raids, so it is a big boost to his consistency. Obstruct is actually another really nice option, which makes it a bit more comfortable to support him from behind with drives and flyer buffing skills. Obstruct can also make it a little bit safer to snipe a backline or running lunge. Vantage is a viable option, and can save you in moments where you haven't healed quite enough, or you can outright one-shot some of the glassier cannons. Now, of course, the Tier 4 stance set doesn't perform as highly if there are a lot of melee fighters on the enemy team, but that's not terribly common in Aether raids, and those situations are usually relatively easy to cover with a different team, or by switching gears to use Claude to hit and run, which he's still surprisingly good at even without a player phase A-slot skill. Next up, we have the 1 to 2 range set using Close Counter or Close Foil. Personally, I lean stubbornly towards Close Counter, because theoretically Claude always wants to hit back and heal up, but I'm kinda wrong here. Dragons are relatively rare at this point, and usually pretty snipeable. And with them out of the picture, Foil is a strict upgrade, as anyone will tell you. Both skills are totally valid, and it really comes down to what you're willing to fodder and which situations you're more worried about covering. Guard becomes a fantastic B-slot here, as discussed with the T4 stances, and with Claude's Omega Recovery, it's not out of the question to stay above 80% HP consistently. I think Obstruct gets a little extra value as an option here too, since taking on more enemies at close range does mean that your supports might be sweating just a little bit more if there are dancers on the field. And Vantage is viable again too, even though it loses some of the effectiveness since it's a little bit harder to one-shot some of the melee threats. The real value of Vantage comes in being able to get off a clutch heal before the first hit comes in, which is why it's still solid, though a bit risky. Compared to the stance build, this set relies a little bit less on dual phasing, which means setup and positioning can be a little bit easier, but that comes at the cost of some of the defensive consistencies that the Tier 4 stance sets offer. Finally, we have the budget build using Fury 4. With 3 Mythics and Summoner support, you can add 20 HP onto Claude's base, which means the loss of 8 after every battle isn't necessarily damning, as long as you can hit those heals. The extra visible stats can be used on both phases, and actually provide the best matchup against AoE specials in particular. If you don't have other premium fodder, this is a very workable option, and the one I've been using so far. I think this A slot synergizes the best with Vantage out of all of them, but Quick Riposte and Guard are pretty much off the table. Obstruct is still an option, but do keep in mind that it has an HP condition. I think Mystic Boost is worth mentioning here, but to me the point of this build is to spend fewer resources, and if you're going to make that kind of sacrifice, I do think you'll get more mileage out of using either a stance or close counter build. There's not too much else to say about this kit. It's cheap, and it plays pretty similarly to the Tier 4 stance sets, but you get a slightly stronger player phase at the cost of defensive luxury, and you can't really afford to tank melee hits with this one. You may want to have a second raiding party set up with Brave Lucina supporting if you want to use this set, or honestly with any of these sets, just so that you can get around any cooldown reduction or guard effects when they show up and guarantee that healing. So, to sum up, Brave Claude is a very unique and fun unit who has a lot of versatility in Aether raids, and can carry you in PvE or other game modes too. I liked him a lot in 3 houses, Fear the Deer, and already used his base version in Aether raids, so he's an easy choice for me to invest in, and I'll get to shake things up a little, make the game a bit more enjoyable for myself. If you like him or his playstyle, I don't think you'll be disappointed should you do the same. I've done my best to give an overview here, but there's only so much I can cover in a video like this. I am planning on using him as my late season carry starting this season, the one beginning on September 1st, so tune into that if you want to see some more Claude AR content and get a better understanding of how he's used. Maybe that'll help convert any of you non-believers too. I would love to hear any of your thoughts or critiques on this video, down there in the comments or on Twitter. Let's have a little discussion. This is my first time making a video like this, and I'm sure that I've got plenty to learn. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'd like to shout out all the other FEHtubers out there, but this time particularly Acarus, Ashikai, and Promise Me One Thing. And to anyone who enjoys Aether Raids content, maybe stay a while, poke around my channel, subscribe, or follow me on Twitter if you want some bite-sized thoughts there. Thanks. See you next time.